Hello, everybody. Mark Zusman from Willamette Week. Delighted to be here with Sam Chapman. Sam, you do a lot of things, but we're talking to you because you are the campaign manager for Measure 109, correct? I've got the number right?
That is correct.
Which is an initiative that has been put on the November ballot by Oregonians who have put, I don't know, 140,000 signatures.
Over 164,000 signatures to be precise.
Verify qualifying for Oregon's much vaunted initiative system. There are actually two drug-related initiatives on the ballot. One, which is the one you're not involved in, would decriminalize a variety of drug offenses. That's not what we're talking about today. We'll talk to the campaign for that at some point. Sam, your measure, Measure 109, would legalize the therapeutic use of psilocybin. Do I have that right?
That is correct.
So why don't you give us a little bit of a bio? Tell us what psilocybin is, what it means by legalizing therapeutic use, and go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as many people are probably very aware, especially in the times of COVID-19, uh, America has a mental health crisis. And unfortunately, here in Oregon, that crisis is even more acute. According to Mental Health America, Oregon actually has the most severe mental health crisis in the country, and that was prior to the pandemic. So there are more people here in Oregon that are suffering from depression and anxiety and addiction than in any other state in the US. And so, given the fact that that's being compounded by COVID, we really believe that it's time to provide people who are suffering from depression, anxiety, and addiction new options. And we believe one of those options is psilocybin therapy. Now, for those who may not be familiar with what psilocybin is the active compound that naturally occurs in hundreds of different types of mushrooms around the world. And a growing body of evidence from leading medical research institutions such as Johns Hopkins, NYU, UCLA, and others are showing that psilocybin shows real promise for depression, anxiety, and addiction. And in fact, it's showing so much promise that the FDA has recently granted psilocybin therapy as a breakthrough therapy designation. Now, you might be wondering, what is a breakthrough therapy designation? There's two things that go into that designation being given by the FDA. One is that there's a very high safety profile associated with psilocybin. It's non-addictive, and it's fairly safe compared to a lot of existing alternatives on the market today, especially when provided in a licensed and regulated system, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit. But there's a lot of people that are out there. We all know someone who's suffering from depression, anxiety, or various forms of addiction. And these studies are really showing promise that in a licensed and regulated environment, people stand to really be able to break through a lot of the mental loops that are associated with depression, anxiety, and addiction. And really, in some sessions, as short as one or two different psilocybin sessions, people are able to see real breakthroughs. And so we're super excited to be able to give Oregon voters an opportunity to create access to this new breakthrough therapy here in Oregon for people who are suffering.
So, Sam, psilocybin is the active ingredient in some fungi, mushrooms. Is it classified as a hallucinogenic, or I don't even know if that's the correct term? It is a hallucinogenic, right?
It's a very strong compound. Yes, that's correct. And can often help people, again, in the right environments, under the right supervision with training and certification from facilitators, which our measure requires, can allow people to step outside of themselves to really understand and break down in a way that they haven't been able to otherwise understand, some of their past traumas and why they're depressed and the anxieties. And so it really is a powerful tool that often can produce challenging experiences for some people, revisiting, traumatic events, triggers of depression. Those can be very challenging for some people, which again is really why we've created a therapeutic framework that requires that when people do get assessed and are allowed permission to access psilocybin therapy, that they do so with a trained professional that can ensure that they feel comfortable and safe within the environment in which they are sometimes having that what can be challenging but profound experience within the psilocybin therapy session.
Sam, your campaign is relatively well funded. You've received a lot of your contributions from one political action committee called, I believe, New Approach. They appear to have two substantial funders. One is Dr. Bronner's Soap, or I guess it's the founder of Dr. Bronner. What's his name?
David Bronner and the Bronner family, correct.
Right. And I know that they have been very active nationally on drug legalization. So is this just sort of a continued effort on the part of the Bronner family?
Sure. So I want to clarify. I would say that the Bronner family has been very active, not only in our campaign in terms of creating access to therapeutic psilocybin, but by reducing and eliminating penalties for drug use in general. And so overall, the Bronner family is no stranger to depression. And David Bronner himself has shared a lot of his personal stories of the struggles that he and his family have gone through. And we're incredibly lucky and grateful to have the involvement of the Bronner family.
So I understand who your supporters are. Who would oppose this? Is this a big pharma? So this is big pharma. Do you expect that they're going to come in?
No, sorry. I was agreeing that generally that, well, we have no organized opposition.
None.
We have no well-funded, well-organized opposition to date.
Wouldn't big pharma? Wouldn't this be something that big pharma you would think would oppose?
No, actually, I think big pharma learned their lesson about being on the wrong side of history a couple of years ago. And what I'm referring to is on the cannabis legalization side. I think for better or for worse, big pharma is also interested in the developing research behind psilocybin and other plant medicines. And so I do not expect them to oppose our campaign.
So if that's the case, and if this measure is not legalizing psilocybin, it's making it legal to use in very specific restricted circumstances under a doctor's supervision. No patient is going to be told by his doctor, you have to take psilocybin. I mean, there's got to be willingness on the part of the medical establishment as well as the patient. And Big Pharma is not opposing it. Why is Oregon the first? Why isn't this in place, this sort of dipping your toes in, taking place all over the country?
It's going to happen. Oregon just happens to be first because we have individuals who are very forward thinking here in Oregon, as you've mentioned, from gay marriage to death with dignity to progressive drug policy reforms. I don't know if it's something in the water or what, but here in Oregon, I feel very lucky to be an Oregonian, to be able to continuously work on the forefront of progressive drug policy reform. And I think that, here in Oregon, I think one of the reasons is something that I mentioned before, which is that we have the highest rate of mental health illness in the country. And so not only are we the leader in several of these different areas, but we stand to arguably benefit the most from a per capita standpoint in terms of really giving people new options for treating mental health illness where others have fallen short.
So given that, and I have looked at your list of endorsers and it is long and impressive, but at the same time, there are a lot of people who you think might climb onto this who aren't. I didn't see the governor as an endorser. The vast majority of the legislature has not endorsed this. I don't believe the Oregon Medical Association has endorsed this. So is that to come, or what's their resistance? Or do you just not need them?
So what I would say is that just because organizations or individuals have not endorsed does not mean necessarily that they're not in favor. It means that they simply are not publicly stating their endorsement. So
right.
I think that and again, that's not to say that opposition might not pop up. It very well still could, but I think that it's really hard to argue against the science that exists. I mean, when we do education, the way that we do education is not, you need to vote yes because. It's, here's what the science says. Here's what psilocybin is. Here's what our measure does and the safeguards and controls that exist. Here's what our measure does not do. And here are the people who stand to benefit, right? Which are probably people that you know, people that have been given a terminal diagnosis, that are suffering from end of life anxiety, veterans, and again, BIPOC communities that are disproportionately affected by COVID. These are all people that we all know. And I think when people start to realize that someone they know, doesn't have to be them, doesn't have to be you or me that would access this, but simply understanding that someone who is struggling, that doesn't have other options that are working for them, they at least deserve an opportunity to try something new.